Hello and welcome to GMBN Tech Ask Show, where you post hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments below, and we'll try and come up with an answer for you. Something
like that anyway, yeah.
So our first question is from Marshu here, who says, what's more important in the general scheme of things, wheelbase or reach? Now I'll put the full question up on the screen here, it's quite long, where you've gone into an analogy about triangle and stability for
I've used that one a few times, yeah.
And so he's saying, well, where does reach come into play? And I heard that Laurie Greenland cares more about front center. So should we just talk about the differences between all of these? Wheelbase is basically axle to axle, really, isn't it? It's the length of your bike. Reach is more like your center to the center of your head tube. So it's almost like the length of the front end of your bike, almost like it is effectively what you reach onto it. For me, it is more like fit when you stood up on the bike. So you could have a long wheelbase and a short reach, really.
And vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the angles of the bike come into this, of course.
Sure. And of course, that's where front center comes in as well, because front center is more like the center of your BB to the center of your front axle. So it's not quite reach because, again, like you said, the angles can change the reach at the top and still have like a longer or shorter front center. So I guess the difference between the two is wheelbase does fit into your analogy of a triangle in that it gives you that kind of stability, especially if you're centered in between your front and your back end. It'll give you more stability at speed. It'll make you feel like you're kind of in the bike, I guess. Well, depending. Yeah. And then reach is more like how the bike feels, like you're almost like your cockpit, like your kind of hands and stood up, and how maneuverable that bike is and how it feels to fit. And then front center, Laurie Greenland probably cares about that because it's more like placing yourself behind the front end of the bike and sort of taking those front end hits. Or
I would say, don't ever compare yourself to pros. Laurie Greenland could ride a shopping trolley downhill faster than anyone here could ride a bike downhill. Yeah, so like I get where you're coming from looking at what he's doing, but honestly, the top of the top, you just not even worth looking. Look at Jack Moyer. He rides a size small bike and he absolutely flies, and he's like my height. You know, the rules are only a guideline to what works for you. Like you said, like the long wheelbase, you get a nice stable bike. A long reach, you can also get a stable bike. Short reach, you can get an unstable feel, and the same with short wheelbase. It's kind of how they all add up. But
and it depends on style as well, because I mean, Laurie could probably get a long front center, but you'd need to really weight the front end if it was really. So if you don't ride the front end, and you don't ride that aggressively, it's probably not
you're going to wash out the front wheel.
Yeah, for sure. So to answer your question,
I think they're both important.
What's important? They're all important.
Yeah.
But for different reasons, and I know it's not the answer you want, but it depends on your style, your terrain, your bike, how you ride it. And there's no magic formula. You kind of have to get to know over time,
based on
really,
this,
don't you?
I would say reach is probably more important because wheelbase tends to come with the geometry of the bike, which is why downhill bikes have such long wheelbase because they're so slack. Yeah, of course, you know, like the sizing affects it, but I'd say reach because I've always said your overall fit on the bike is the most important thing because you can make everything else work. Basically, but if you're on a bike with a long wheelbase and it's a tiny short cockpit, your body weight's going to be so far forwards and backwards the whole time, you're going to be off balance. So the long wheelbase won't do anything for you. Yeah,
you got to feel in control of your bike, haven't you? So maybe reach slightly more important, but generally, I don't think you could boil it down to one number on it.
No, for sure. Next up is from Jesper Carlson. Hi, if I want a more downhill capable bike, should I put a 29-inch front tyre on instead of my 27.5? Do you mean wheel? If I do, will this affect the bike's geometry?
Yes.
Well, if you obviously can't, I'm guessing you mean a wheel. So you can't just put a 29-inch wheel in most 27.5-inch forks. Generally, you need the correct fork for that. So you'll need a new fork as well as the front wheel, and yeah, that's massively going to affect your geometry if your bike's not designed for it. So I wouldn't be doing that. You could, if you wanted to tweak your geometry, play with a slightly bigger tyre. You could get a slightly slacker head angle from that, and in a much cheaper way of doing it.
So Thomas has said, do I need to sand my rotors down, or is it fine to just clean them and bed them in normally if switching from organic to metal pads?
Ooh.
Well, I don't.
There's different schools of thought here.
Well, I don't.
Okay, well,
You're probably more of a nerd.
Yeah, I probably would, because different. And to be honest, I'd probably have fresh rotors, and I would keep them apart completely. I'm sure some purists would say that as well, but I would generally roughen them up.
What your
the rotors?
See, the thing for me
because you want to transfer material from the pad onto the rotor.
I don't think anyone can get that grade fine enough to be good. I mean, you can't just sit there with some.
No, I do real coarse.
Really?
Yeah, real coarse. Only just scuff them on the top to do a bit. But there's no right or wrong on this. There's like different schools of thought and what works for people. I would clean them. I'd probably clean them with a brake cleaner, then boil in water and let them completely dry, just to make sure there's no contaminants, and then give them a rough up. Probably clean them again and then put them back on and bed them in. But not everyone's as weird as me.
Yeah, or you could do what I do and just clean them up, put the new pads in, bed them in, and see how it goes. And then if any problems arise, go from there. And don't be a super nerd like Doddy.
Charming. Right, okay.
Is this why you've got so many drawers in your bike chute? It's just like pairs of brake pads with disc rotors.
I probably have got about
cave.
100 random disc rotors at home. Yeah. Next up from XTJ M Hub X. Cool name. I bought a new Marin hardtail the other day, made no modifications except for changing the pedals to a pair of crank brothers and a new set of grips. I love the bike, but when riding it, the brake disc kept rubbing against the caliper, making a horrible noise and slowing my bike down. I don't know what's going on. It's still continuing. What should I do?
Well, did it do that before? I don't know if it's like a new problem. I don't think changing the grips and all that's gonna.
Did you buy it from a shop?
It.
If you bought it from a shop, just go back to the shop.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be like that.
No, but maybe the caliper's outlined. If it's brand new out of the box, or you've just, ordered it, or you've bought it from a bike shop, they may not have checked all these things. And if you're riding it for the first time and it's rubbing, it might just be out of line. Try and undo the bolts on the calipers, realign them. We've got plenty of videos on that, haven't we, Doddy?
Yeah, and obviously you could lift up your front wheel. You can feel if it's the front one that's rubbing or the back one that's rubbing. It's fairly simple to sort out.
It's just a matter of undoing bolts and realigning the caliper and doing them back up, basically. So have a little experiment, or otherwise, check out one of our more detailed videos on squealing brakes and rubbing brakes and servicing brakes, I think.
Yeah, happy days.
So Billy Hess says, on wheel set weight, does a heavy hub really affect the suspension as much as the rim and tyre weight? For example, would a Onyx Classic hubs versus Shimano XT hubs? So he's obviously in the market for some new hubs and wants to know whether it's going to affect his suspension. I think,
in the case of like heavy cassettes, for example, it does make a big difference to how it feels. And give you a wild example, if you had a roll-off 14-speed rear hub, which weighs as much as a small planet as your hub, yes, it will make a significant difference to how the suspension feels compared to a super light hub. At the end of the day, it's all moving up and down. So the lightest weight possible you can have on there, which is why light wheels are always a good thing on a bike with suspension. Yeah, it does make a difference. But if you're talking like a couple hundred grams, perhaps not.
Yeah, I tried to have a look at the Onyx. I couldn't find the exact weight, but it could be anything from 300 to 500.
Well, 500 obviously is a fair bit, but 300 is like, it's not too much.
Yeah, Shimano's 300. So they could be similar. It could be about 200 more.
Yeah, and then you've also got to bear in mind as well that if you've got a bike that's got a heavy hub, heavy cassette, but your bike works perfectly well, there's not really a problem. It's only if you remove all that stuff suddenly and then you try it, you're like, oh, whoa, this is like a significant difference. So,
yeah, well, you did your chainless video, didn't you? And took the derailleur off and did notice.
I took the derailleur off because, not to lose the weight off the bike though, I took the derailleur off because of the fact that it was an Axis one and there was no cable or anything holding it in place. So it's just flopping around all over the place.
Right.
And I'd done that previously and the battery shot off. So I took that off for that reason, not to remove excess weight. But we did discuss this with Steve and we actually initially were going to do another variation. We were going to have cassette and mech on and then take it all off. But we kind of just ran out of time basically with daylight on the hill and stuff.
But just go back to your question. So in comparing it to tyre and rim weight, so the overall weight might affect the suspension, but tyre and rim weight is more like your rolling weight.
Absolutely.
So the heavier that back wheel is going to be, the harder it is to pedal. So it's going to feel more sluggish when pedaling, especially uphill or along, basically. So that's kind of the slight differences. But you know, if you're on an enduro bike or a trail bike and you care about descending, for example, weight isn't necessarily a bad thing, is it? Because weight can be a good thing in terms of like picking up rolling momentum, that sort of thing. So I feel like there's a yes and a no in that answer.
Yeah, I mean the weight significantly affects handling for sure, but it's, you know,
but whether that's bad or not.
Yeah, I mean within reason. You wouldn't want a downhill bike to have super light wheels. Forget the strength here for a second. If I had super light wheels, it just won't handle very well. You do need an element of weight on a bike like that, despite the overall weight of bikes coming down. Whereas a trail bike, if you had like heavy duty enduro wheels, heavy duty tyres, it's just going to feel like a pig climbing it anywhere because it's just too heavy for what the application is. So yeah, weight makes a significant difference, but within a reason. You wouldn't put cross-country wheels on a heavy duty enduro bike. You know, they'll feel really nice on a flat and really nice up the hill, awful everywhere else. And you'll kill them.
So, I mean, my personal answer to that is buy decent hubs, and then if you're going to save weight, do it on the tyre and the rim, maybe. That's
well, I mean, out of all those items, the rim is the most consumable because that's the thing you're most likely to break. Whereas a hub, you can actually serve as a hub plenty of times to keep them going. So yeah, a good hub is important, a good rim, a little less so. Next is from CDG Leopard. How can I do an emergency unclip if I'm falling?
Is it a trick question?
Every time I've fallen off my bike when I've been clipped in, you just kind of pop out at some point.
Yeah, well, I could say bear in mind that this system, the clips have come from skiing, haven't they? So was it Shimano who did it? Basically, you know, you have that emergency get out. So when the skiers crashed, their skis would just pop off. And this sort of came into play on bikes. Can't remember when, you probably know the exact date, you were probably there.
1990 for Shimano's produced.
And the whole point is that if you crash, your bike, you know, will turn in a way that your feet will unclip. So to answer your question, I think if you're worried about falling and not unclipping, generally it just kind of happens automatically because your legs will move and the bike will move and you'll unclip. But in terms of getting used to doing it yourself, then I would just say practice. Honestly, you can also, some of the pedals you can make looser. So Shimano, I believe, still have dials on them.
That's right, yeah.
So you can unwind them so it becomes easier to unclip. So have a look at your pedals and see if you can loosen them off and have a go with the clips, see if that makes it easier. With Crank Brothers, their cleats, you can swap over to make them easier or harder to unclip. So check out the manual if you've got those. And just practice, basically. I've got used to it.
That is the key thing, is practice. You want to be able to clip in without looking at your pedals, just like touching your nose, you know, or going for the gear stick in a car, whatever it is. You want to make it second nature. Click, 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 click. And as soon as you can do that, you'll just come out without thinking. Of course, there will be an exception here and there where you don't and you end up crashing.
We all do.
But the biggest thing is don't fear it. Just learn your pedals, whatever brand they are. Just clip in and out constantly, get the feel of them. And after a while, you will just adapt to it without even thinking.
Clip out, in and out a lot when you're out on a ride. Just get used to it on both sides as well, and it'll become second nature, I think. But yeah, anyway, let us know how it goes, and that's all we've got time for today.
Oh, another one in the bag.
Yes.
Happy days.
Boom. And if you've got any questions for us, then don't forget to use hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments below, and we will try and answer your questions for you.
Happy days. See you soon, everyone.
Thanks, bye.
Take care.